This episode of GunBlog VarietyCast brought to you by lawofselfdefense.com. Go to lawofselfdefense.com/variety to learn about your state's self-defense laws. Sign up for one of their online or in-person seminars or buy the book Law of Self-Defense and get 10% off when you use the discount code VARIETY at checkout. That's lawofselfdefense.com/variety. Sit back, relax, and take a ride with us on the GunBlog VarietyCast, episode 73. Welcome back to the GunBlog VarietyCast. I'm your host, Sean from NC GunBlog, and with me today is Adam from Guns, Cars, Tech Blog. How are you doing, Adam?
The joys of parenting. Lots of projectile vomiting in my house this week.
Oh, dear, I did not need to know that.
Yeah.
Well, let's get straight to the tactical dog and fitness report and far, far away from the projectile vomiting. 20.2 dog walking miles and the gym, and the weight loss continues.
So, I still have that rattling cough that I've had for the last 3 weeks, but because of all the other medical issues in my house this week, I was able to go to the doctor on Wednesday. And I got a steroid shot, and I got some albuterol, and I'm feeling much better. But before the podcast started, I was like, "Hey, yeah, so I'm not coughing as much," and you were like, "You're not?" So it's better, but I'm not good.
The last time I had a cough that didn't go away for a while, now that you mention it, I did get a steroid shot, and that's one of the things that the doctor said. He said, sometimes these things persist, and you whack it really big with a steroid shot, and the body just that it heals.
Yeah.
So
I'm not waking up in the middle of the night coughing, which is kind of the major thing.
That's good.
Now I'm just waking up in the middle of the night with baby screaming, which is just normal.
And now it's time for Blue Collar Prepping with that bratty kid sister of the gun blogosphere, Erin Paulette. This week, Erin talks about prepping lessons she learned from camping.
Come on, every pony. It's time for Blue Collar Prepping with Erin Paulette.
So hey, Erin, what did you do for New Year's?
I went camping with a friend of mine from December 31st until January 2nd. Neither of us really does the social scene, and we wanted to stay away from all the amateur drinkers, so we decided to test out our prepping gear by grabbing our bug-out bags and seeing how they worked in the field. Well, I suppose I should clarify that I tested my bug-out bag. My friend just grabbed his camping gear. Now, there's a subtle difference there. While I have said before that if you have camping equipment, then you do have bug-out gear, the difference is that I planned to live out of only what I had in my pack, while my friend went to the grocery store and brought along food. And there's nothing quite as destructive to a commitment to live off of MREs than smelling fresh eggs and bacon by the campfire. But I digress. The point here is that every single prepper needs to go camping at least once this year in order to test out their gear to find out what works, what doesn't, and what needs to be changed. Here are just a few of the observations that I picked up from my camping trip. Sometimes the most efficient method of packing your bag results in being unable to quickly get at gear. My tent, being one of the heaviest things in my pack, was as close to the middle of my back as possible, but that meant it had other objects on top of it and in front of it. It took me several minutes to unpack my bag so that I could reach it, which wasn't a good thing because by the time I had it out and ready to set up, it was already dark. Speaking of being in the dark, a headlamp is one of the best investments you can make for a bug-out bag. You just can't beat the utility of having a hands-free flashlight that points wherever you're looking. Just make sure you have a bright lamp. I mentioned silk long underwear in last week's segment, and mine really came through for me through a variety of temperatures. The first night it was hot and humid, so I slept with the rainfly off on top of my sleeping bag, and the long johns wicked away sweat, kept me from sticking to my bag, and preserved my modesty. And when it cooled off the following 2 nights, they were an extra layer that helped keep me warm. So I highly recommend having a pair in your bug-out bag in place of generic pajamas or whatever you plan to sleep in. Now, it's very easy to trip over tent stakes or lines in the dark, and that can lead to people getting hurt or damaging a tent. I believe very strongly in the glow lights put out by UV Packlight, and so I took one from my bag and looped it around the stake that we almost tripped over. With that glowing marker, that accident didn't happen again. So if you're interested in getting some, I recommend the 5-pack of mini reusable glow sticks for $20. They come with split key rings so you can attach them to keys, zipper pulls, or anything you might want to quickly find in the dark, like a first aid kit. Always bring a tarp. Even if you have all the rain gear you need, do not underestimate the value of having a waterproof tarp to throw over your equipment. It rained all of New Year's Day, and we had a heck of a time keeping our firewood dry. An extra tarp would have helped with that. And in addition, a tarp will prevent gear from being blown away, and covering it will help protect against target of opportunity petty theft. Always have a water bottle with you as well, either in stainless steel or Nalgene. This is something I brought along because I had the room and it weighed very little, and I was glad to have it. You can do all sorts of things with an empty bottle. Drink out of it, use it for cooking, put items in it for storage, have it hold soapy water for washing dishes or yourself, or if you're cold at night, you can fill it with hot water and use it to warm yourself in your sleeping bag.
And if you're a man, you can pee in it.
Yes, you can get your Bear Grylls on that way. If you have the plumbing, you can use the bathroom without leaving the tent, which is useful if it's cold outside. And since your urine comes out at body temperature, you can then use that bottle to keep you warm. Another good thing to have is a small washcloth. Even if you have a camp towel, a washcloth is a great thing to have in your bug-out bag. It's great for all sorts of cleaning jobs, dishes, utensils, and even yourself. If you're too sweaty to sleep at night, like I was that first day, you can use that bottle full of water and that washcloth to give yourself a sponge bath, and then use your camp towel to dry off. And finally, I want to say good things about the tent I used. It's a Stansport black granite starlight tent. It's a 2-pole tent, but it isn't exactly a dome, it's more of an oblong. Follow the show notes and look at it, you'll understand what I mean. The entire top and sides are covered with no-seam mesh, so it's a great way to camp under the stars in good weather, and there's a rain fly with a gear vestibule for when it rains. It only weighs about 5.5 pounds, so it's a great tent for a backpack. I only have 2 real complaints about it. The first is that even though it's billed as the 2-person tent, it's going to be very crowded inside with 2 people plus their gear. You'd better be very familiar with each other, and by that I mean, my, what lovely underwear you have on familiar. But if you're by yourself, you will have plenty of roll-around room for yourself and all your stuff. Second, there's no tie-down within the tent for drying things off, and this is likely due to the fact that most of the tent is mesh. So, if you plan to hang up items to dry, you'll need to rig up some kind of system for that. But other than that, it's a great tent, and I highly recommend it.
All right, Aaron. It was good to talk with you. I'll see you again next week.
Take care, Sean.
If you'd like to read more from Erin, check out her blog, lurkingrhythmically.blogspot.com.
Felons behaving badly. Man wanted for murder after body found in burning car, arrested. Dateline, Charlotte, North Carolina. A man wanted in connection to a man's death whose body was found in a burning car has been arrested, police say. The homicide case began with a shooting in northwest Charlotte and led to a fatal officer-involved shooting 4 days later. Suspect 139 is facing murder charges in the death of victim, whose body was found inside a burning car at a Gaston County school. Suspect 1 is also charged with assault with a deadly weapon with intent to kill, inflicting serious injury, robbery with a dangerous weapon, kidnapping, and breaking and entering. A second suspect in victim's death, 30-year-old Suspect 2, was fatally shot by police when they attempted to serve a warrant on him, and he reportedly opened fire. During the confrontation with Suspect 2, Charlotte-Mecklenburg police officer Jessica Zenoble was shot in the ankle. She was taken to Carolina's Medical Center to be treated for her injuries, which were described as minor. 2 other men, Suspect 3 and Suspect 4, are also charged with murder and victim's death, among other charges ranging from conspiracy to commit armed robbery to kidnapping. The case began on December 30th when police began investigating a shooting on Woodland Circle in Charlotte. During that investigation, officers were told there was a body inside a car. Several hours later, victim's body was found inside a burning vehicle at Warlick Academy in Ranlow. Investigators have not said how victim died, but they did say he was killed in Charlotte before being taken to Gaston County where the car was set on fire. Police said Suspect 4 was arrested while trying to leave the scene of the burning vehicle.
Well, that'll do it.
On Sunday, officers went to a home on the 2600 block of Watson Drive to arrest Suspect 2 and Suspect 3 when they say Suspect 2 shot at them and was in turn fatally shot. Suspect 3 was found inside the home and was arrested without incident. Which is funny because the other news story that I read said that the SWAT team surrounded him and he was arrested after he was barricaded inside the building and they had to talk him out.
Yeah, without incident, with the SWAT team, whatever.
They talked him out. They didn't shoot him. I guess that's what they meant. 8 officers were placed on administrative leave following the fatal confrontation. This is the standard protocol for any officer-involved shooting, which means 8 officers shot back at the dude.
Yeah, this is like a Tarantino movie.
Investigators have not said what evidence led to the charges against Suspect 1. So we have 4 suspects, one of whom has been shot and killed, and 1 victim. So 5 people, right?
Right.
How many do you figure have some sort of a criminal record here?
I'm gonna go out on a limb here, and I'm gonna say all of them.
All of them, because you're looking at the show notes, right? Suspect number 1, resisting officer, misdemeanor. Breaking and entering vehicles, felon, unknown conversion only. I don't know what that means, but apparently it's a felony breaking and entering vehicles, and it may have been from out of state. I can't tell. Larceny over 200, felon class H. Felony breaking and entering, felon class H. Larceny after breaking and entering, felon class H. Habitual felon, felon class C. Suspect 2, this is the one who got shot and killed. Fraud, felon class I. Obtained property by false pretense, cheat services, felon class H. Armed robbery, conspiracy, felon class E. Manslaughter, felon class D. Robbery with a dangerous weapon, felon class D.
Oh, good. So he was a killer. Well, that's done now.
Yes, that will never happen again.
Right.
Suspect 3, robbery with a dangerous weapon, conspiracy, felon class E. Armed robbery, conspiracy, felon class E. And he apparently got a post-release revocation, so he got his parole revoked and thrown back in jail. And a robbery with a dangerous weapon, felon class D. So he was a multiple armed robber. Suspect number 4, assault on a female, misdemeanor class A1. Possess schedule 6, misdemeanor class 3. Carry concealed weapon, misdemeanor class 2. Drug paraphernalia, use possess, misdemeanor class 1. Possess schedule 1, felon class I. 3 counts, possess with intent to sell, schedule 2, felon class H. And he also had a post-release revocation, felon class H. And assault with a deadly weapon, inflicting serious injury, felon class E. And the victim, possessed with intent to sell, schedule 2, felon class H. Common law robbery, felon class G. And robbery with a dangerous weapon, felon class D.
Nice guys.
Nice.
And I was shocked to find out that somebody who had killed somebody before was involved in a murder. Shocked.
I know. Shocked.
Figure he would have been reformed.
Yep. Well, this week on Foreign Policy for Grownups, Nikki reminds us that just because there are terrorists in the Middle East doesn't mean that we can ignore drug dealers and money launderers in South and Central America.
Nikki, recently the United States requested extradition of former Honduran Vice President Jaime Rosenthal from Honduras. Why? And why should we care? Who is this Rosenthal guy?
Well, those are some good questions. Let's start with the who, because that will explain the why and the why should we care. So I was listening to talk radio one day in my car, and the host was asking the same question. So this was right after the Rosenthals were designated back in October under the Foreign Narcotics Kingpin Designation Act. I remember we discussed the Kingpin Act probably more than a year ago now, but for those who don't remember, its purpose is to deny significant foreign narcotics traffickers, their related businesses, and their operatives access to the U.S. financial system, and to prohibit all trade and transactions between the traffickers and U.S. companies and individuals. The Kingpin Act authorizes the president to take these actions when he determines that a foreign person plays a significant role in international narcotics trafficking. Treasury's Office of Foreign Assets Control, or OFAC, administers these designations. They mean that anyone who is deemed a narcotics trafficker is cut off from the U.S. financial system, U.S. businesses, etc. But back to Jaime. So when I was listening to this radio rant that I referenced earlier, the conservative radio host couldn't understand why the Obama administration was designating some Jewish guy from Honduras when there's ISIS, Russia, international terrorism, blah, blah, blah to worry about, and he was implying that Obama has a thing against Jews. So while I'm not a huge fan of this administration's foreign policy, the radio host could not have been more wrong. Rosenthal is a former vice president of Honduras with ties to the United States, who is worth more than $690 million and was indicted in October along with his son Yanni and nephew Yankel on charges that they laundered money for drug traffickers. So the Treasury Department also placed sanctions on the family's holdings under the Kingpin Act, cutting them off from the U.S. financial system. And Yankel Rosenthal, a former Minister of Investment and president of the Club Deportivo Marathon soccer team, was arrested in Miami. So OFAC also sanctioned Rosenthal's Inversiones Continental, which controls the Rosenthal family's banking, financial services, real estate, agriculture, construction, tourism, you name it. They've got media interests. All of that has been sanctioned under the Kingpin Act, as well as Rosenthal's agricultural arm, Empacadora Continental, its related financial institutions, and 3 offshore companies in the British Virgin Islands.
So what were the charges? Were they criminally charged or just sanctioned?
Oh, they were criminally charged. OFAC's designation was a separate action. The Manhattan U.S. Attorney's Office charged the Rosenthals in connection with a multi-year scheme to launder the proceeds of narcotics trafficking offenses and foreign bribery offenses through accounts located in the United States. Specifically, the indictment charges the defendants with conspiring to conduct financial transactions occurring in whole or in part in the United States and involving the proceeds of narcotics offenses and offenses against a foreign nation involving bribery of public officials and the misappropriation, theft, or embezzlement of public funds. So these guys were thieves as well. Shortly after the charges were filed and the designations were announced, the Honduran security forces seized 19 businesses and various properties belonging to Grupo Continental. The Honduras banking regulator announced in October its intent to liquidate Banco Continental and began returning money to more than 220,000 depositors. Rosenthal was all upset and remarked in the press that he was so broke he couldn't feed the crocodiles on his crocodile farm. Yes, this dude farms crocodiles. The Rosenthals are one of the most powerful families in Latin America, so I'm fairly sure they'll find out a way to feed the critters.
Okay, so they're bad guys. Why do we care about them?
Well, for one, as I said earlier, they were using the U.S. financial system to launder money for drug cartels and proceeds from corruption and embezzlement. Part of Treasury's mission is to protect the U.S. financial system from abuse. So this qualifies. Additionally, it sends the message that not even powerful politicians and rich families are above the law. We don't want their dirty money in the United States, and we certainly don't want to be party to said dirty money being laundered through our financial system. The Rosenthals are also media and communication moguls, and since 2007, the Rosenthal telecommunications firm Cable Color has been accused by Honduran and international authorities of illegal use of its telephone lines for gray traffic. Now, what gray traffic is, it's the false reporting of international long-distance calls as domestic calls, which allows people to avoid additional charges associated with international calls, like payment for the use of underwater cables, of international taxes paid to like the foreign governments where the calls originate or terminate. In Honduras, international traffic is controlled by the public telephone company Hondutel, which is, or would be if we're operated honestly and efficiently, the single largest source of revenue to the state. Now, I'm not a big fan of fees and government ownership and regulation of communications infrastructure, but nor am I a fan of corrupt individuals stealing from foreign governments and laundering those proceeds in my country.
So what's next for Rosenthal?
Well, the United States has requested that the 80-year-old scumbag be extradited, and it'll be up to the Honduran courts to decide whether that's going to happen. Meanwhile, Rosenthal's lawyer says he can't be extradited until the criminal investigation of his activities in Honduras is completed. Honduras is investigating Rosenthal for tax fraud and forgery. He allegedly failed to pay taxes on shipments of beef from Brazil that he reported as being purchased in the United States by his company, Alimentos Continental, which was seized in October. So I think the Honduran officials are a bit nervous. If they extradite Rosenthal to the United States, no one is safe, because the rest of them, and I'm sure there are a ton of others who are corrupt and are embezzling money and probably laundering it in the United States as well, they're at risk too. And that's why we should care about the Rosenthals.
All right, Nikki, it was good to talk with you. I'll see you again next week.
You bet. Take care.
Nikki blogs at thelibertyzone.com.
Plug of the week. This week, Facebook reminded me of the birthday of one of my personal heroes, an old Army friend of mine, Jeff. My friend Jeff survived the Luigi's Massacre. He not only made it out himself, but he brought out his friend, who happened to be pregnant at the time. She had been shot twice, and Jeff used his basic Army first aid training to keep her breathing until Police Lieutenant Bill Simons crawled through the front door and shot the killer right over Jeff's head. Unfortunately, Jeff's other friend, Wes Cover, who was the fiancé of the pregnant woman, friend of Jeff's, died. He died on Jeff's knee. I told this story, as Jeff told it to me, for the Triangle Tactical podcast. Luke at Triangle Tactical was kind enough to cut out just that little segment, and I've got a link to it in the show notes. If you haven't listened to it, you should. It's the perfect answer to all those anti-gunners who tell you, well, you'd change your mind if you knew anyone who was a victim of gun violence. Jeff survived this massacre at Luigi's, but it took a terrible toll on him. As you can imagine, having one friend die on your knee while keeping another alive for the duration of a 20-minute massacre, waiting for rescue, leads to some pretty bad post-traumatic stress. Jeff wanted me to let people know that he's gone through some pretty new post-traumatic stress training program through the VA that he says works pretty well. He says the program itself sucks, just going through is miserable, but the results are really good. He says it's called PE, or Prolonged Exposure Therapy, and you can do it from home via a secure web connection on your computer. So if you or someone you know has post-traumatic stress, Jeff says you might want to check this out. There's a link for it in the show notes. This week's special guest is Beth Alcazar, who writes the Pacifiers and Peacemakers blog on the U.S. Concealed Carry Association website. So before you run out and buy a brand new gun for that woman in your life, better listen to what Beth has to say. Author of the Pacifiers and Peacemakers column and featured writer in Concealed Carry magazine, Beth Alcazar is a mother and an avid firearms rights supporter. An NRA, Sig Sauer Academy, and USCCA certified instructor, chapter leader of the Well-Armed Woman, and action pistol competitor with the Well-Armed Woman shooting team, Beth is passionate about sharing safe and responsible firearms ownership and usage with others. Born in the Hawkeye State, Beth now makes her home in Alabama with her husband and their 3 children. Welcome to the show, Beth.
Oh, thanks very much. I'm honored to be here today.
So, Beth, it's tax season. Time to take that big fat tax refund and buy a gun for the ladies in our lives, right? What, with all the bad things in the world, our wives, our moms, our sisters, fiancés, daughters, they need to protect themselves.
I obviously 100% support the idea of a woman protecting herself, but while that sounds like a super idea, guys don't always get it quite right. They think they're being super helpful, but unfortunately, you're doing it all wrong. And here's why. Let me set up a quick comparison here. And I think a lot of guys can relate to their woman in their lives, whether it's daughter, wife, whatever. The woman in their life going out on a shopping spree looking for that perfect pair of shoes. Guys can't relate in buying that perfect pair of shoes because they usually find one pair and they buy it over and over and over again. But what if you, as the husband or the dad, the brother, whatever the case may be, what if you had to go buy that pair of shoes? Would you have any clue where to start? Would you know what to consider as far as style or fashion or color or size? Would you understand what to do as far as fit? The bottom line is a woman needs to go pick out her own shoes, needs to try them on, walk around in them, see if she's comfortable, and have plenty of other things to kind of pick and choose from. It's a process, and sometimes it can be a long and tedious trial and error process.
So guys really shouldn't buy guns for their female family members?
Well, don't get me wrong. I think that giving someone the gift of being able to protect herself is absolutely fabulous. It's a wonderful gesture. But overall, those intentions aren't always translating into great results.
What usually happens?
Well, guys will go to the store and get in a conversation with the clerk and kind of talk about what's the cool thing right now? What's the best-selling compact pistol or pocket pistol? And they'll be convinced to buy something based on sales, based on what others like or based on just what that sales clerk knows about. And they aren't really considering all the other aspects that are involved. Where's that gun going to go? Is it going to go in a purse? Is it going to go in a car? Is it going to be on that woman's body? There are just so many other aspects, factors, and considerations that come into play that guys don't necessarily get it. Again, they go to the store, they look at a few, they pick what they like, but that doesn't always translate to what that particular lady needs.
Is it really so different getting a gun for a woman?
The simple answer is yes, it is different. We've got to consider the fact that women are built a lot differently than men, and that could be size and that could be strength. You've got to think about hand size and whether or not she's comfortable with a certain size of gun. I know that I'm 6 feet tall and my hands are a little bit larger, so for me, some of the smaller guns don't work. And think about it. A lot of times when the guys go to the gun stores, the perfect gun for a female, according to those folks, are the pink it and shrink it versions. You know, they're really pretty. You know, they look cool. They're Tiffany blue, or maybe they are pink or purple, and they're really small. Well, we all know if we've shot before that the smaller guns can be more difficult to shoot. A lot of women don't know this, and a lot of guys might not consider this fact. They're just picking what they think is going to be that smaller fit for a smaller person. So instead of finding the right firearm, they find maybe a revolver or whatever is on sale for that day. They give it to that woman in their life, and then that woman basically keeps it in the drawer of her bedside table for the rest of her life. It's too small or uncomfortable. It doesn't fit. And again, going back to that shoe analogy, that's what really matters. Does that gun fit? And that's a process. It really is a long process. It is different for women than it is for men. You're considering what is going to fit on your body. You're considering if you're able to rack that slide or use that trigger safely and efficiently. You've also got to consider that this whole thing is not like some magic fairy tale with the wave of the wand, voila, here's your perfect gun. On the other hand, it's not like a mathematical equation either where everything lines up neatly and perfectly and you just automatically get the right answer. There's trial and error involved. There's all those considerations for how the pistol will be used or where the gun will be carried. And of course, the experience level of the person. If she can't get out and try the gun herself, if she can't shoot the gun herself, then how are you going to know if she can effectively, safely, and proficiently use that firearm? Women need to be encouraged to take those extra steps, to research the possibilities, to try out those guns before someone buys them for that woman, or she buys one even herself. There's nothing wrong with going and training, taking a class without having a firearm. I know a lot of ladies always think, if I'm going to take this NRA class or I'm going to take a concealed carry class, I have to have a gun first. And that's not necessarily true. So take those extra steps. Try some things on, find what really fits you and your personality and your lifestyle, and then make that decision. From married women, single women, moms, grandmothers, college students, business women, it really doesn't matter. If you really and truly want to empower a woman to take care of herself and to protect herself, you've got to give her more options and you've got to make her part of the process.
So any final thoughts for the guys who have tax refunds burning holes in their pockets?
Well, I think absolutely. Your idea of purchasing that firearm is stellar, but instead of buying the gun for that lady in your life, buy it with her. That way she has an opportunity to be part of the process. She has a part in asking questions, doing some research, and ultimately she has the opportunity to make sure that that gun fits her.
All right, Beth, it was good to talk with you. See you again soon.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I really hope to talk to you guys again, and stay safe and be well armed.
You can read more from Beth at usconcealedcarry.com/blog and click on Pacifiers and Peacemakers in the left sidebar. There will be a direct link to her column and to her Facebook page in the show notes. You can also meet Beth in person at the Fashion and Firearms Show Saturday, March 12th, 2016 in Indianapolis, Indiana, and at the USCCA Concealed Carry Expo April 29th through May 1st in Atlanta, Georgia.
Fun with headlines.
So this is one of those, it's true, but is it really what? It's true-ish.
True-ish. Is it truthy?
It's truthy. It's truthy. Philadelphia Eagles head coach, quote, fired after refusing to attend the team's annual holiday party because it was on a Monday, unquote. Now, the quotes are in the headline. So that sounds like he got fired because he didn't want to go to a party that was on a Monday. And that's like, oh, your party's on Monday? No, I don't want to go. Oh, you don't want to come to my party? Okay, you're fired. Let me just read a couple of lines here. A new report suggests that one of the reasons Chip Kelly was fired from his position as head coach of the Philadelphia Eagles is because he ruined the annual holiday party. According to CBS Sports, Jeffrey Lurie, and I'm sorry, I'm not really a sports guy, so I have no idea if I'm pronouncing that guy's name right. The chairman and CEO of the Philadelphia Eagles takes pride in the holiday party he hosts for the organization and goes to a great expense to throw the highly anticipated gathering. This year, Kelly refused to attend the party because it happened to be scheduled for a Monday night, CBS Sports reported. The former head coach argued that having a party on Monday night would disrupt the coach's planning for the week, sources told CBS Sports. Lurie reluctantly moved the party from the scheduled Monday night to a Friday afternoon on site to facilitate Kelly's busy schedule, the report states. So here's clue number one. He didn't go to the party on a Monday because it ended up not being on a Monday.
Okay.
They moved it to a Friday. In addition, had Kelly remained as head coach, several critical employees with the team were reportedly planning to pursue options with other teams, sources told CBS Sports.
So, wait, other people were going to leave because they didn't like working with him?
Yes. Lurie had also reportedly disliked the culture that was being taken on while Kelly was in power and felt that Kelly was unable to relate to most people on a human level.
So, wait a second. So this is the Philadelphia Eagles, right?
Right.
And he was unable to relate to the Philadelphia Eagles organization on a human level.
Right.
So what, he was nice to people?
Oh, I don't know. Again, I'm not really...
Well, it was the Eagles.
Yeah.
Was he nice to Santa?
Maybe.
Did he refuse to throw snowballs at Santa? Did he refuse to beat up opposing fans?
Well, maybe they were doing all those things because he was head coach.
No, this went long before he was
Oh, it was long before. Okay.
No, you didn't know that the world's worst fans are Eagles fans?
No, because the world's worst fans are LSU Tigers fans.
Oh, no. No. Eagles fans are horrible people. They booed Santa. You know this, right?
I actually didn't know that.
Yeah, look it up. They threw snowballs at Santa.
Why do they throw snowballs at... You know
Because
what?
they're Philadelphia Eagles fans.
Okay. So it turns out that while, yes, he was fired after not wanting to go to a party on a Monday that ended up not being on a Monday, the real reason why he was fired was because nobody liked him. But hey, the headline got me to read a story about sports, which I don't really care about, so good on them. Joke's on me.
Joke's on you. And we reported it.
And we reported it.
Yay.
Badly.
Yes. About the Eagles. Oh, I lived in the Philadelphia area, so I had to care about the Eagles for a while. You can't live in the Philadelphia area and not care about the Eagles football.
Really? Because
Yeah.
I live in Nashville and I really don't care about the Titans.
You can do that, but you cannot live in Philadelphia and not care about the Eagles. Because if you live in Philadelphia, people care about the Eagles, and the people that you care about the Eagles. So to some extent, you will care about how the Eagles do.
You will be made to care.
No, it's not so much that. They care about their team, and you like them, and you kind of want the Eagles to do well so they'll feel good, and then the Eagles inevitably do something stupid, and your friends all feel bad. And it's just so sad. Because they do good, and everybody gets their hopes up, and then they crash and burn, and you're like, oh, God, why? At least that was my experience for the 3 or 4 years that I was, 5 years? I don't know. I can't remember how long I was in that area.
All right.
Very sad. It was very sad. A lot of good people that I was friends with, and they really did care about the Eagles. And it was very sad. For all that they were rotten, awful, nasty fans, they were nice people when they weren't being fans.
That's probably true about a lot of folks.
Well, they didn't personally throw snow at Santa.
Not that you know of.
Well, no, they weren't personally there. It was long before they were fans.
No, okay.
So what do you do when your laptop catches the contents of your drink cup? Barron tells us how to prevent it, how to recover from it, and why having backups can make the difference between recovery and total data loss in Tech Tips.
Tech Tips.
You are damaging my calm.
Tech Tips with the Barron. Well, hey, Barron, how's it going?
You know what sucks, Sean?
Uh-oh. Somebody had a bad day, didn't they?
Yes, they did. An unnamed relative lost their primary computer after their dog knocked a root beer on top of it.
Ooh, the damage?
The full extent is currently unknown. I have the laptop in my possession to try and clean the gunk out of it, and we did crack it open over the weekend, and gunk barely begins to describe it. It probably hasn't been cleaned in a while. There's a bunch of dirt. The soda's now solid. It's not pretty. But you want to know what was really bad? Not a single backup. No files saved anywhere, not even in the cloud. Luckily, I have equipment on hand for salvaging hard drives, and this one was simple for the most part. There's still some data recovery that remains, but I got basically all the really important stuff that she needed.
I take it that this is a gentle reminder that we need to back up our stuff?
Yes, you do. 2 weeks ago, just before Christmas, I picked up a 2.5-inch, 4TB external hard drive for $100 from Costco. More than enough room for anyone to do backups, especially incremental backups. Additionally, I'm going to give some general tips to help avoid a full-blown catastrophe, because prevention is by far the best route. This will apply mainly to laptops because, honestly, that's what most people work with nowadays for computing. If it's your primary computer, it goes without saying, baby it. If you work with drinks around it, elevate it. Use something like a cooling pad. While it will help remove some of the heat, which is a good thing, elevating it will keep it from sitting in a puddle if you do in fact end up spilling. Depending on the height of your cooler or stand, use an external keyboard. This is going to go without saying for comfort, but if you can do it in general, even with a lower pad, most people dump right straight onto the keyboard. And what do you want to replace? Your laptop or the keyboard?
Ha! Keyboard. Keyboard's like $20.
I know, right?
Okay, that's really simple, but what do I do if something happens?
If you do dump something on it, pray that it's water. Immediately turn it off. If possible, remove the battery. Dry all the excess water off using dry cloths. If it starts to feel saturated, use a new one. Avoid pressure except with a perfectly clean new dry cloth, as putting pressure on it can push the moisture back out of the cloth into the device. If it was water, you can try the following. Put it in a bag of dry rice for 48 hours before turning it on again. This can be awkward though depending on the size of the device. Warm dry air blowing through a box can also work. The idea here is that the humidity of the air needs to be low enough to suck the moisture back out of the laptop or device. If it was some drink with material in it, i.e. coffee, tea, root beer, sodas, you're gonna need to open the laptop and blot everything dry carefully. If you have a friend capable of fixing this stuff, it's now time to barter and break out a case of beer. The sugars, even when dry, will alter the characteristics of the circuit board and it will still have issues. As I said, the best method is to prevent the issue to begin with. $30 for a cooler or stand is cheap insurance to keep it dry, especially if you have pets or kids.
All right, Barron. It was good to talk with you. I'll see you again next week.
See you next week, Sean.
Barron still blogs at the-minuteman.org. And now is probably also a good time to remind you the backup strategy is 3, 2, 1. 3 copies of your data, 2 different media, 1 offsite location.
Yeah, probably a good idea. The J Block.
So last year, about this time, it was episode 20, we talked about this headline. U.S. police officer shooting deaths up 56% in 2014. Yes, that headline was all over the place last January because it was basically lying with statistics. You see, in 2013, officer deaths from gunfire, and now this also includes canine officers, there were 30 deaths, and that was a 50-year low. So in 2014, when there were 47 deaths via gunfire, that was a 56% increase. Oh no! But guess what? It was still below the 10-year average of 51, and it was also the lowest number of deaths in 5 years had you not counted the previous year that had the historical low. So I figured we would revisit this a little bit. What about 2015?
We know it was horrendous because everything we've heard is that because of the Ferguson effect, people have been shooting cops. just recently we had this guy like swear allegiance to Islam, and he didn't kill that cop, but like we've seen attacks on cops. It's been wall-to-wall violence against police. We've seen it all over the place. So I mean, it's got to be like there's got to be a big spike in officers killed by gunfire this year. It's probably like double what it was last year.
Yeah. How about a 20% drop from last year? So 2014, 47 deaths, and 2015, 39. But you saw that in the media, right? It was all over the place about how things are so much safer now as far as, guns killing cops.
Well, it's probably because they're running around killing all those black people.
Right. So I looked for stories on police officer deaths for the last 2 weeks. This is in January 2016. Found a lot of stuff about the Washington Post project that basically cataloged all people killed by police officers. They say it was 986 people in 2015. And that story is everywhere. Now, I thought the number was closer to 1,200 for some reason, but apparently it's 986. And they say, without actually providing any statistics, that it's double the number in the over the last 10 years. Like, it's double the average. But I don't really know where they got those numbers. But they've moved on from, oh my God, guns are so bad, look at officer safety, to, oh my God, cops are so bad and only Black Lives Matter.
Very interesting. I guess all stories come with a sell-by date.
Yes. And, this is one of those things where, gee, they could beat the NRA over the head because of all this gunfire last year. But now they can't really do that because if you look at the stories from last year and then you look at the stories from this year, it's like, oh, wait, no, those numbers don't match up. Let's not talk about that anymore. Let's talk about this other thing.
Right.
And remember, the modern left thinks that all cops are trigger-happy racists and should be the only ones that have guns.
Exactly. What's interesting, I would like to know, you posted, and I'm going to put these in the show notes, you showed me two little graphs. One is the last since 2005, so it's about the last 10 years. And the last one, the second graph, is 1847.
Yes.
So pre-Civil War. And this is total, this is raw numbers of police officers. So it's not the rate of police officer deaths, it's total numbers of police officer deaths.
By gunfire.
And it spikes really high during Prohibition, then it drops, and then it spikes again in the 60s and 70s and it's dropped off since. And it'd be interesting to see what the rate was, the number of police officers by the total number of police officers there were, because we know now there are a lot more police officers now than there were, say, 100 years ago.
Right.
Because there were a lot of places that didn't have cops 100 years ago because, why would you have a cop in a one-horse town?
Right.
And there are, 800,000 police officers now. There are 800,000 sworn police officers in the United States, state, federal, and local. It's statistically a relatively safe job. There are a lot of jobs far more dangerous than being a police officer statistically. Now, very few jobs come with the risk of somebody trying to shoot you.
Right.
So, I mean, the particular risks you face are pretty horrendous.
Yeah, nobody goes, hey, wait a second, that guy's wearing a McDonald's uniform. Get him.
Well, I watched a video today that really did have that. He's wearing a McDonald's uniform.
Okay,
Let's get him.
But
that's unusual.
Exception that proves the rule.
Right, but it wasn't specifically because he was wearing a McDonald's uniform. But yeah, it's interesting that given 800,000 uniformed officers and 39 of them got shot to death, that's an incredibly small number.
And that's not just continental U.S. That includes Puerto Rico. That includes military police that are overseas. That's included in that 39.
Does that also include... Oh, in fact, I know that includes any officer that died this year who happened to have been shot in a different year and died of complications.
Correct.
That's how they do that. So if you die this year, but you die of complications, even if it was 15, 20 years ago that you got shot, I've seen those happen in other years. So it's very interesting that, I would prefer to see 0 die. But when you consider that when 39 is a lot of people, if you put 39 coffins in my house, that's a lot of people. But when you put 39 coffins in the midst of 800,000, officers.
Right.
It's a tiny number.
Right.
And that says something very, very, very good about how peaceful a nation we live in. And now a word from our sponsor.
You know what will happen. If you ever have to defend yourself, you're going to end up in handcuffs. Are you trained to win the fight after the fight? Sure, you can draw, aim, and put 2 in the 10 ring, but have you learned your legal self-defense? Do you know the law? Go to lawofselfdefense.com/variety to sign up for your legal self-defense class. Each class is tailored to the laws in your state. Attorney Andrew Branco will teach you the law. Not just what the law says, but what the judge's legal opinions say, what the jury instructions say. Sure, you could risk spending the rest of your life in prison because you followed the advice of some gun store counter jockey, or you could spend the day with the man who literally wrote the book on the law of self-defense. Carry a gun so you're hard to kill. Know the law so you're hard to convict. Go to lawofselfdefense.com/variety to sign up for a legal self-defense class in your state. And make sure to use discount code VARIETY at checkout to receive 10% off.
This podcast runs on your donations. Go to GunBlog VarietyCast.com and click on the donate or subscribe button in the right sidebar. You can make a one-time donation of any amount or subscribe for as little as $2 a month. That doesn't sound like much, but we pay our server costs monthly. A little help from you is a big help to us.
As we try to figure out what kind of a soup sandwich Obama's executive orders actually are, Weird has a little fun with the news reporting about it from Minnesota in This Week in Anti-Gun Nuttery. Well, hey, Weird, what do you got for me this week?
So at the time of this recording, Obama has just announced his executive orders on gun control, but the water's still a little murky on exactly how those impact us. While we sift through that garbage, here's a news report talking about it before they were announced.
The next leg of the gun control debate could come as soon as mid-January. That's when President Obama intends to follow through on a plan that would broaden background checks.
Yep, universal background checks again, the panacea of gun control.
The law already requires federally licensed gun retailers to perform criminal checks via the FBI's database. But many firearms are sold by private sellers, say at a gun show or from their homes. Thus, doing a background check isn't obliged. Well, that's what Obama's executive order would change.
This is a reporter for WDIO News out of Duluth, Minnesota. She's technically right, but really private sellers have no means to do a criminal background check when they sell a firearm. The only way to run a background check is to essentially give your gun to a gun shop and then have the shop give the gun to a person who you want to transfer it to. The shop has to not only run the background check, but put it in their books that they acquired and then transferred the gun in question, even if it was just for a brief moment. Because this is not a small task, the shop generally will bill you for their time. Generally, this is $20 to $50, but some shops have been known to charge $150 or more. Further, back in 2013, Senator Tom Coburn put forward a bill that would allow private sellers to access the NICS check via a website, and the check would simply be performed on a person, and no information on the gun would be recorded. It was strongly opposed by the anti-gun forces. The antis don't care a whit about background checks. What they want is names, addresses, and gun models and serial numbers. They don't care about background checks because they think nobody should have a gun. From the pro-gun side of the report, there is an interesting rebuttal.
And they put them in place to please this group and that other group over there, but when it gets right down to it, they don't enforce them, and at the same time, they're infringing on our rights as American citizens.
This is really an amazing point, because many of the anti-gun states like California, Massachusetts, Maryland, New York, among others, have universal background checks for decades. Recently, Colorado, Washington, and Oregon were targeted by Michael Bloomberg for universal background checks. The laws narrowly passed and were extremely controversial. Some of the protests on this law have been gun owners with clean backgrounds transferring the guns to eligible gun owners in broad daylight and in plain view. To my knowledge, even with these protests, no arrests have been made, let alone convictions. And there have been a huge body of law enforcement chiefs and sheriffs who have pledged to ignore these laws because they are so onerous and unenforceable. The antis complain about this, but again, they don't really care about the background checks.
Meanwhile, Joan Peterson with the Northland chapter of the Brady campaign, a group working towards reducing gun violence, says it has nothing to do with the Second Amendment, but rather keeping our communities safe.
Oh, joys! Sean, did you know the very first episode of this show, I was talking about the Nuttery of Joan Peterson? But I've never done an audio fisc on Joan. I think this is my Christmas gift from the cosmos. So nothing to do with the Second Amendment? Well, the courts haven't tackled this particular issue yet. I could argue that this is indeed both infringement of the right to keep and bear arms, as well as a tax on an enumerated constitutional right. But at this moment, that is just my personal interpretation. As for keeping communities safe, this is just pure crap.
Well, it's estimated that about 40% of gun sales go without a background check. The sellers, I would assume, are not intentionally selling guns to somebody who should not have them, a prohibited purchaser like a felon, domestic abuser, somebody who's adjudicated mentally ill, but they don't know to whom they're selling if they don't do a background check.
Okay, from the start, that 40% number is utter crap. First, it's a study nearly 2 decades old, talking about gun transfers before the Brady Bill was passed. Second, it heavily rounds up the maybe no answers, where the person on the phone wasn't 100% positive about the firearms transferred to no. And then further, rounds up the resulting 35.7% to 40%. Not even getting into the fact that only 251 people were polled, giving very large uncertainty to numbers that are already incorrectly cited as fact. And Jones claims that good guys are just mistakenly selling to prohibited persons committing crimes? Well, surprise, surprise, when criminals are asked in prison where they got their illegal guns from, well, it turns out very few got their guns at gun shows. Instead, they get them from family members, who we can assume know them personally and have an idea of their vocations, or fellow members of the criminal ranks, as in people who care little about the law, gun laws included. So now, for reasons unknown to me, they finished with talk about a local gun show. Still, the points are interesting.
At a local level, the Cloquet Gun Show has 30 to 35 vendors. The organizer says 75% are already federally licensed.
So if there are 35 vendors and 75% are licensed FFLs, that means there are about 9 vendors who are not licensed selling guns! Well, no, it means the guy selling jerky, the guy selling knives, the guy selling reloading supplies, the guy selling survival food, that guy selling ammunition, the guy selling stun guns, the guy selling holsters, that guy selling books, and the guy flogging his taxidermy business don't have FFLs. Why? Because they don't need them, because they aren't selling guns. Let's close on this one.
Many others take down the buyer's driver's license for their own protection.
So now why would they do that? You see, it's not only a crime to knowingly sell to someone with a criminal background or a mental health issue, but it's also a crime to sell to somebody who is not of legal age to own said gun, or to somebody who's not from that state. Looking at a driver's license means you know for a fact that they are of legal age and reside in the state where the sale is taking place. Criminal and mental issues are harder to tell, but many people, when asked to see ID on a gun sale, will pull out their carry permit rather than their driver's license. That carry permit goes the extra step and shows the person is of age and from the appropriate state, but also can pass a background check. But they mentioned taking down the information. Why do that? Well, in the unlikely event that the police come knocking at your door looking for that gun you once owned, you can quickly point to the direction of the guy you sold it to, as well as show that you did the best you could to observe the law. Just look at how that short clip just shreds the idea of how we need one more law. But hey, when we tried to make them happy by mandating background checks, by putting the NICS into everybody's hand rather than the FFL only, and letting everybody run their own checks, it just wasn't good enough. Remember, these people want us to emulate UK and Australia. Remember what they did to the gun owners there. That's not rain running down my back, Joan.
All right, Weird. It was good to talk with you. I'll see you again next week.
See you next week, Sean.
In addition to appearing here, Weird is a regular host on The Squirrel Report and blogs at weirdworld.com. That's WEERD world.com.
Stuff that grinds my gears. Adam, you know what grinds my gears?
Our president.
Yep, that's exactly what's grinding my gears too.
That guy.
That guy. So our president took to the airwaves this week to attempt to con us into believing 3 things. Number 1, that his executive orders on gun control had the power to change anything. Number 2, that his executive orders, if they could change anything, would reduce so-called gun violence. And 3, that he believes in the Second Amendment. No, seriously. He even said that he respects it.
There's a ritual about this whole thing that I have to do. I believe in the Second Amendment. It's there written on the paper. It guarantees a right to bear arms.
See? Doesn't he sound totally believable?
If you like your guns, you can keep buying your guns.
If you like your doctor, you will be able to keep your doctor. Period.
But you're not going to believe one comparison he made later in his little speech. Usually when a politician wants to pretend he respects the rights of citizens, he tries to compare the United States to England or Australia. At least with one of the Anglosphere countries, they can sound rational while abandoning the U.S. Constitution. You'll never guess which country Obama held up as one of the better examples of what could be achieved if only we had the courage to restrict firearms here in America.
Some of you may recall at the same time that Sandy Hook happened, a disturbed person in China took a knife and tried to kill with a knife a bunch of children in China. But most of them survived because he didn't have access to a powerful weapon.
Are you kidding me? That's your argument, Mr. President? If only the United States would adopt the forward-thinking and progressive weapons restriction policies of the People's Republic of China, we could prevent horrible tragedies like Sandy Hook? Seriously, Mr. President? You're going to climb on top of tens of millions of dead Chinese victims of Mao and his successors to lecture me about how horrible it is for people to have access to a powerful weapon?
To a powerful weapon.
You mean like those tanks in Tiananmen Square? Oh, wait.
And given that the killer in Sandy Hook used the murder your mom and steal her guns loophole, which none of your executive orders appear to have closed, I can only conclude that you object to his mother legally owning the rifle in the first place, and therefore you object to me owning a similar rifle. Well, too bad. I have it, I'm keeping it, and you can't have it. And I don't give a damn what the Chinese think about it any more than I care about what you think about it, Mr. President. Well, that's our show for the week.
Thanks again to Rob Allen for our music.
And Firearms Policy Coalition for their support.
And thank you for listening to the GunBlog VarietyCast.
Constructive criticism can be sent to Sean at SeanSorrentino.com.
And hate mail to WizardPC at GunsCarsTech.com.
Like and share us on Facebook.
If you have Facebook.
And if you receive this podcast through iTunes, make sure to leave us a glowing 5-star review.
Show notes can be found at GunBlogVarietyCast.com/episode 73.
This is a URS production.